Well, alright. We finally got 4 comedy films out of the way, so now we can finally move on to a real horror film now. So, what am I going to be faced with this time? Oh, damn. Yeah, this is gonna be quite one to get through.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, say that thou art High King of heaven, thou art. Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am here with episode 5 of Halloween Horror Review 6. And this episode is going to be for the first actual horror film of the season, and that is going to be for 2013's The Conjuring, which is directed by James Wan. And was pretty much the film that officially had made him more of a big, massive achievement filmmaker, which finally got him the attention. So, what is the plot of The Conjuring, the first entry of what ended up being a massive franchise? A massive franchise that had multiple spin offs that most of the time were critically panned and weren't really that successful. They got lucky with Annabelle Creation, but that was it. But this was the film that, when this first came out, it really achieved something. Like, it really blew people's minds away. Like, it was a big surprise when this film was released. It was the most talked about film that summer. It was the most talked about horror film that year. So what is the plot of The Conjuring? Well, this is the first entry that's based on the two real-life investigators and Lorraine Warren. This is set in 1971 when the Perron family move into a dilapidated Rhode Island farmhouse. Rhode Island. Huh. Kind of around meanwhile, as that's happening, and another haunted case is going on, which you know what it is, but it's not that case. This is a different house in Rhode Island. And soon strange things start happening around it with escalating nightmarish terror. So in desperation, Carolyn contacts the noted paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren to examine the house. And what the Warrens discover is this whole area is steeped in satanic haunting that is now targeting the family wherever they go. In order to stop this evil, the Warrens still have to call upon all their skills and spiritual strength to defeat this spectral menace at its source that threatens to destroy everyone involved. So, as for my reaction, it's kind of sad it took many years for me to review this film, but I knew I needed to review this movie because I really did want to, and because we had this series end recently, several weeks ago with The Conjuring Last Rites, which I reviewed, and you could go check out that review. So, I rewatched it for Halloween Horror Review 6, and how was it? I would have to definitely say, this is still to this day, one of the best modern horror films of all time. I remember watching this in high school back when it was really relevant, and back when it came out, because when this first came out, I was kind of actually in the first year of high school. Well, I was about to enter grade 10 around the time this had come out, but I watched this film and I pretty much was about to enter grade 12, and it is easily one of the few scariest modern horror films out there. This film came out and made so much money, everyone was raving to go see this film, people would just not stop talking about it. It was kind of like the new Exorcist. In a way, it was kind of like what The Exorcist was for people in the 70s. So, how was this film made? Development of this film began in January 2012, and reports confirmed that James Wan would be the director of a film that would be titled, at the time, The Warren Files. But it got retitled to The Conjuring. So production began in North Carolina, Wilmington, in February 2012, and scenes were shot in chronological order. Then, after the film was officially shot and advertised, The Conjuring was released in the United States and Canada on July 19, 2013 by Warner Bros. Pictures and New Line Cinema. When this movie came out, this shockingly got more positive reviews than any other James Wan film at the time and made over $319 million worldwide on a $20 million budget. And like back then, horror films barely made that much money. This was one of the few in a while to make over 300 million worldwide. And you could definitely see why. Because this was very fresh, this was well written, this was well directed. It was very creative, and it actually felt very real. That's why it was so successful. And of course, it spawned a massive franchise. But we all know was hit or miss. Here are all the good qualities in the story of the first Conjuring and what makes it such a great, amazing horror film. So, we all know now it's now been 12 years since this film had come out. It's like, none of the shine has come off it at all. The quality is still very much there. This film is definitely a horror classic. Like, as a horror, it packs in some real scares. There's much more to it. It really has attention, the story, real intrigue. And because of the fact, like, especially because this was based off two real-life paranormal investigators. And the thing is, like, James Wan, before he made this, he was known as just kind of really a filmmaker. I mean, yeah, he did direct the first Saw, which you all know is one of the greatest horror films of all time, but after that first Saw movie, a lot of the films he was following up with, they were critically panned flops. Dead Silence, yeah, it has a cult following now, but back when that movie came out, it was hated by critics and it flopped. He did a thriller called Death Sentence, which was not a horror film starring Kevin Bacon, and that also flopped. That flopped even more than Dead Silence did, and that went unnoticed quick. He wouldn't direct another film again for 4 years after those two, until directing Insidious, which, now it didn't reach the acclaim this movie got, but it still got decently positive reviews, and it was pretty decently, so it did start kind of slightly put him back on the map, and the reason he made that film was because he felt like people like, studios got too scared to work with him because of Saw's nature, because some people thought Saw was a torture movie, despite the fact that that's not what James Wan intended. The only reason it's a torture film now is because of all the cash grab sequels that would later get made after 3. That's why. Like, James Wan wanted Saw to be like kind of like 7. He wanted to make his own version of 7. That's all he wanted. That's all he wanted. Just one simple just kind of one simple low budget horror thriller film. It was technically supposed to only be one film, but that's what he felt like. So he made Insidious and teamed up with Blumhouse, and he's pretty much with Blumhouse now, because he wanted to prove to people he wasn't just the Saw guy. And then he made this film. And this really put him back on the map for good, and he's been back on the map ever since this film. I mean, this guy did stuff like Fury 7. That made $1 billion. He did the 2 Aquaman films. Aquaman 1 made $1 billion. And he's even produced a few other films. He's produced that 2021 Mortal Kombat film, and he did produce some bad films. He produced Night Swim. That sucked. He produced that shitty Megan sequel. He produced the first one as well. He produced The Monkey. That also sucked. He didn't direct those. He produced those. So, he's now a well-known filmmaker, and it's because of this movie. The key with The Conjuring is that it has freshness on its side. It's evidenced by the ream of horror, and argues on other sides about nothing new on the table. Those fans really do feel well and going hungry for horror, and they get that kind of horror here. The Conjuring does everything right for the splinter of horror it deals with. There's a lot to admire about a horror film that, in this day and age, would stand tall and proud against the ream of remakes, sequels, and other slashers that were known for haunting a lot of multiplexes or strip malls back in their time. Like, this film, it's not Blumhouse-like. A lot of times, like, early horror films in 2010s were constantly being like Blumhouse wannabes. This time around, this didn't feel like that. This film is free of gore. This film is free of a lot of the horror films of sex. Like, it really alienates a good portion of the horror fan base. Those who like horror serve with appetizing scares and suspense, and this delivers right on that particular table for those kind of fans. And like one thing, like some people can say it's based on a true story, but that tagline really is kind of a dead horse at this rate because sometimes a lot of films that claim are based on true stories are very irrelevant, like they're faithful to real events. I mean, these were real paranormal investigators, but it's not really based on a true story and stuff. Like, it's a film where you kind of just have to kind of buy into the premise to be able to enjoy it, commit it as a scary story, the same way as director James Wan always intended. And it's a very well acted film as well. Like, the two that are easily the most impressive are Vera Farmiga from The Departed and Patrick Wilson, who play the two paranormal experts, and they have they have easily great chemistry. They're some of the best lead characters in horror films to come out to this day. They have definite chemistry with one another, they bring solid believability to the characters, and they play things really well straight. And the time period is also very terrific. Like, I really like the idea of this. I like that this is set in the 70s, and it feels very authentic to the story. It has the added benefit of a retro feel. It goes back to classic 70s horror films, and it derives a lot of the influence. Like, it feels like the horror films of The Exorcist. It feels like the horror films of The Omen. Heck, you know something? It even has a bit of like the Wes Craven and John Carpenter like feel with the jump scares. There's something very refreshing in a world, kind of like this is a world like back then. 70s didn't have stuff like mobile phones or tweets or like this. So this was around the time where you could be able to do a traditional haunted house story easily. So how do we start off the film? So we start off the film in the year 1968, where Ed and Lorraine Warren are investigating an Annabelle case, which is another film. Because these two friends had this possessed doll, and this spirit that claimed to be the spirit of the 7-year-old, they allowed it to possess the doll, and the hauntings became more disturbing. But then the Warrens tell them the doll was not possessed, it was just a conduit for a demonic spirit who wanted to possess one of their friends. And that's where it all starts off. We get a title card explaining the Warrens, and then the main title happens. Then we get to 3 years later, where our real story takes place, 1971. The Perron family, they move into a farmhouse on Rhode Island. They have 5 daughters, one named Andrea, one named Nancy, one named Christine, one named Cindy, one named April. And their dog is skeptical of entering the house, and eventually while they're there, like, they're setting up, and then they're playing this, and when the daughters are playing this game called Hide and Clap, they discover a boarded up cellar during that in the house, and they're told they cannot enter there ever again. But ever since then, the paranormal events start to occur within the first 2 nights. All the clocks stop at 3:07 a.m. And there's many more problems that happen. Carolyn awakens with bruises every morning. Sadie gets found dead in the yard. And Carolyn and Christine, who share a room, they end up like encountering a malevolent spirit that haunts them in their sleep. One of them, though, thinks like one of them's messing with them a few times, even though they're not. And then eventually after that night, they actually do discover the demonic spirit that's actually messing with them. So, like, that's how our story kind of starts off. We don't get overkilling of the boo jump scares. The jump scares get placed with care and very up superbly with all the tension. None of the cliche conventions of a haunted house film are here. You got the creaky doors, you got the strange smells, you got the cellar, you got many more stuff. And you got Juan's talented knack for a good scare and effective production design. From all the mysterious bruises that appear, and often the frequent leg pulls that you've seen a lot in demonic possession films. There's like sequences of the game there's this intimidating version of hide and seek called Hide and Clap that leads up to one of the scariest scenes in horror. The Conjuring is a lesson like you're able to have sustained unease until the big finale gets unleashed, and is a horror film how you were able to build up jump scares, like how you're able to get away with jump scares very well. The script doesn't even have any cheese or pointless filler. Like, it feels refreshing in a horror stuff genre that sometimes does suffer those problems. You got a great score from Joseph Bishara that's really nerve-shredding to listen to, and it's a refreshing company because it doesn't resort to a lot of shrieks to try to make the viewer feel afraid. Like, it doesn't overwhelm the scene. The cinematography from John Leonetti has very gothic-like feel to it, like whenever it's in the lakeside or inside the house. And you got a strong lead cast of Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, Lil Taylor, Ron Livingston. And the 70s setting is perfect. Like, and that's the thing. Like, James Wan often felt it was very impossible to make a horror film like this set in the present. Like if this was set in the present, think about this. There'd be the teenage daughters would probably constantly be taking pictures of the demons with their iPhones, not acting smart about it, and probably getting themselves stupidly killed. And the demons would turn to victims. Quick. So that a film like this would be impossible to set in the present world. So the 70s setting is terrific for a film like this. And like you can't get, like, especially in the 70s, you couldn't get away with no, in the modern day setting, you could barely get away with stuff like leg pulls or hair pulls or constant bruises showing up or apparitions like this. Oh, and you could probably not get away with a game called Hide and Clap. Like, that's definitely something that I could easily see scaring a lot of viewers off of playing the game hide and seek. Like, The Conjuring does something a horror movie was barely able to do in a long time back when this first came out. So speaking of Hide and Clap, we get to easily what I consider to be one of the scariest horror scenes of 2010's horror films. It's when the mother character goes in the basement, is trying to look for her daughter, and you pretty much hear what she thinks is her daughter telling her this, but it's really just the demons messing with her. When she's looking to sell her with the lighter, hey, want to play hide and clap like you saw my intro? And then you see this like dark hallway, and while she's just looking around, these hands show up behind, and like that, even. They literally clap like that, and it just comes the most random fucking time out of nowhere. Like, when I first saw a scene back when I first watched this on Netflix back in 2015, this was my reaction to that. I kid you fucking not. Like, it's built up well. The music blends in the scene well, like, and stuff. Like, the idea of, like, not really having a lot of lights. You can still have some lights in the scenes, but sometimes a lot of scenes happen in pitch black, and it does work well here. Wherever, like, there's characters running around the house, or the jumps and spooks were great, and so eventually enough is enough. And Carolyn decides to finally contact the Warrens, who are doing this initial investigation while during that Lorraine sees this dark entity that's latched onto their family, and leaving the house would not really free them, or by the time they arrive, and so be able to gather evidence of this whole spirit that's possessing them, they put cameras, they put bells around the house, with help from their assistant and this police officer that's also arrived to aid them. And the research reveals that apparently the house belonged to this Satanist and witch that killed her weeks-old baby, sacrificed her to the devil, and then took her life in 1863 at 3:07 in the morning, after cursing all who takes her land or moves into her house. And so that's why the Perrons are being haunted by this whole demon. That's all why. So, and there were reports of multiple murders and suicides for the years in the houses that got built on the land. And the Perrons are likely the next target of this witch. So eventually, Carolyn gets completely possessed by Bathsheba, and meanwhile in the cellar, Lorraine sees the spirit of a woman that Bathsheba possessed long ago and forced to kill her child, and is planning to make Carolyn do the same thing, make the cycle continue. So the Warrens conclude that they have a lot of evidence to receive this authorization from the church to perform an exorcism, and And then Father Gordon, their ally, explains that approval would have to come from the Vatican because the Perron family are not members of the church, and because they're not really church people. And like, here's the thing: the Warrens have good chemistry with the family when they arrive. Like, eventually, while they're investigating the house, like Ron Perron takes them, like takes the daughters out for a little bit, and they pretty much help with the Warrens actually help with the chores around their place for a little while. So I really do like the scenes they have together the scenes they do have together. And the jump scares are there, but they're also necessary and they're not predictable. Like, they're not like the Blumhouse levels of predictable jump scares. Like, no. The jump scares come when they're needed. The story and the Warren story in this is actually pretty well terrific. And the characters of the Warrens are very unexpected, and the movie does focus on them as much as it did on the family, and it was evenly balanced. One side focuses on the family, one side focuses on the Warrens, and then the middle act of the film, they eventually do meet up, and that's the bit I liked. I actually like how you have an evenly balanced time with both sides, with both groups. And the Warrens really, and also you see the Warrens have a daughter named Judy of their own, and there's a bit where she gets involved in this terrifying scene involving the Annabelle doll. Like, that was another thing, that everyone was talking about the Annabelle doll, and then Annabelle got a movie, and people were hyped for that, and then it came out, and everyone saw what it was. For the first Annabelle film, anyways. So yeah, both sides have really good chemistry with one another, and even still have great chemistry when they all meet. And the praise goes for the direction done by James Wan. Really like James Wan's attention to detail in this film. He does great at sticking to the story and the script. Like, this showed that he actually was a good filmmaker. He was not just a guy who made Saw and that was it. He actually got to finally show his talent and direction in this. Like, this is why you can see why this finally got him up there with the big leagues. Finally got him to direct, and actually got him the role of directing stuff like Fury 7 or the Aquaman films. Like, how he got to do all that stuff. And his direction of each actor, like from Wilson, who had actually collaborated with James Wan a lot of times, collaborated with him on Insidious 1 and 2, and even collaborated with him in the Aquaman films as well. And Vera Farmiga to Livingston and Taylor, and also even the daughters work, because all of them give great performances, and the daughters are not annoying, they're not insufferable, they're not morons. They actually feel like actual characters. They feel like actual kids. James Wan does really masterful and really shaping the movie well. I mean, this is a plot that wouldn't really be anything really new, but it still has the same stuff as a lot of other horror films. But the reason why it's beautiful here is because it's presented well. Especially like the last half. Like, the last half is extremely haunting. Like, when they're in the basement, they're trying to free Carolyn from her possession, or Judy gets attacked by the Annabelle doll. And like The Conjuring, some can say The Conjuring is based on true events, but it shouldn't really be taken as a true-to-life story, because it's definitely a horror fest roller coaster ride. Like, the directing and the camera work really create this perfect balance of fright, suspense, and horror. They kind of really keep you watching, like, what could probably go on, or even have a light on when you go to sleep. And even feel relief when the demon finally vanishes at the end. And of course, the supernatural male events is really gradually well revealed up until the final denouement. So, with that being said, now we get on to the finale and how it all ends. So, meanwhile, while the Warrens are kind of investigating the whole Perron's house, their daughter Judy, who you see like a few glimpses of in the film, but eventually would get on to play a major role in the final film, The Last Rites, which this time around you get a scene where she gets attacked by the demon Bathsheba, who is holding the Annabelle doll, and like this is the scene that got that doll talked about by everybody. And when this happens, when Bathsheba's holding the doll, like, the doll slowly turns its head to Judy, like, and it just stares at her terrified, and then Bathsheba then attacks her, and it turns out Bathsheba's trying to warn the Warrens that this is to stay away, likely to stay away, and this isn't going to end well if they don't stop. So the Perron family has to take refuge in a motel, but Carolyn is long possessed at this rate, and Christine or April are abducted, taken back to the house to be killed, and so Ed, Lorraine, and Brad then immediately go back to the house. They tie Carolyn to a chair, and Ed attempts the exorcism himself, and though Carolyn escapes from the whole curtain that they put on her to try to exorcise her, and attempts to kill April, and Lorraine is able to pretty much call her by reminder of a family memory, and so Ed is able to complete the exorcism, and that's another thing, like, when he's giving this lecture to this whole entire class, he pretty much tells them that exorcisms are really dangerous and potentially harmful. Here, because of Lorraine's aid, Ed's able to complete the exorcism and succeeded it, and so Bathsheba is condemned and sent back to hell. And just like that. So with that, their job with the Perrons is done. And then Ed and Lorraine go back home, and that haunted music box that was pretty much triggering the thing and was kind of triggering up the whole attack, and was what one of the daughters found when they moved into the house. Ed adds it to the room of cursed artifacts that you always see at the end of the films or see throughout the films. It's full of artifacts that they collect from all their other cases, and of course he's then called because somebody needs to see him, and they closes the door behind him, and then you pretty much hear the music box playing for a little bit, and it cuts to black, and you see pictures of the Perron family and the Warrens, and that's the end of the movie. That's how the first Conjuring film ends. There's no cheesy jump scare. It actually ends with some success. They're able to successfully save Carolyn. And of course, the music box goes back into all their artifacts. It's another job that's come and gone for the Warrens. Business as usual. And this was the beginning of a divisive franchise. But this was still a horror classic. Definitely, no doubt. Now, do I have any bad qualities with the film? If I had to say, based on a true story tagline, I would say that's kind of a hoax tagline, because sometimes based on a true story kind of gets used to make people see the film, and then they find out it's kind of fake. Like Paranormal Activity did that example. And look how that film, and honestly, unlike this film though, Paranormal Activity was an awful film. One of the most overhyped horror films of all time. And that story, like Paranormal Activity, that never happened. That did not happen in real life. And the first half does kind of get a bit slow because of the script demand, but then the movie changes gears in the second half when all the paranormal stuff takes place. And it does pick up from there. And what else can I think of? I can't think of much else. I think either the true story tagline and the first half kind of being dragging a little bit, but everything else I do enjoy. The Conjuring is still a horror masterpiece, so other than those, I definitely still enjoy this movie even 12 years later, and I consider it a horror masterpiece of the 2010s. So in the end, yes, I would still watch and buy The Conjuring for your collection for sure, no doubt, because it's definitely one of the best modern horror films out there, especially in today's age of horror. Anyways, that's it for my review of The Conjuring, and when I rank The Conjuring, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love good artistic modern horror and love James Wan as a filmmaker, then I would totally watch or buy The Conjuring for your collection for sure, no doubt. And if we're going to rank The Conjuring, I'm going to give The Conjuring a 9 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That officially wraps up my review for The Conjuring, so our next episode is going to be for the sequel film, The Conjuring 2, which to me is easily my favorite film of the series. So I can't wait to do this one. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode and review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this one to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.